Psycho, released in 1960, is directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and it's one of the most influential movies, period. It did not only just change the horror genre, but it changed all of filmmaking. Psycho was so scary when it came out that a film critic left the theater and quit her job as a film critic. Caroline Lejeune is her name. She actually was friends with Hitchcock way back in the day. She was a film critic since the 1930s. So she saw the history of cinema from the 1930s all the way to the 1960s. And if you check her out on Wikipedia, you'll see that her last day active is 1960, because when she saw Psycho, she quit. She saw the writing on the wall that cinema was going to go into an ugly direction, and she was out. She was terrified. That's how scary Psycho was for audiences. Now, the story of making Psycho is absolutely fascinating. Hitchcock brought this to the studio. They told him to take a hike. They didn't want to take a risk on this violent horror project. They thought the novel was way too violent to adapt. And Hitchcock is now at the height of his power. It's 1960. He's made dozens and dozens of hits. He came to America in 1940. In the 40s, for example, his film Rebecca, he didn't really get final cut. He was at the whims of the producer. But now this is Hitchcock in 1960. So he says, you know what, screw you. I'm gonna pay for it myself. He paid for Psycho out of pocket, and that made it an extremely low budget feature, but also it allowed him to take the necessary risk he wanted to take with the picture without having the studio breathing down his neck. And to save on cost, that's actually one of the reasons Psycho is in black and white. Not only does it save money, but the bloody, gory scenes, he could avoid so much of visceral violence not having the bright red blood and just having it look black and white. Now, we all have frames of references when it comes to classic films like this. We've seen it in popular media. You just kind of absorb it just existing out in the world. You know things about Psycho, even if you're not even a big film fan. I knew about the shower scene. I knew who Norman Bates was. I knew about his motel. I knew about his crazy mother. All of that was floating in my head. So to my surprise, when the film opens with Janet Leigh, and it's 20 to 30 minutes of her just getting to Bates Motel, where she steals money from her boss, and she tries to go on the run with her boyfriend, but she makes the unfortunate mistake at stopping at Bates Motel. These 20 to 30 minutes felt very foreign to me, because this is not what I was expecting. I was expecting immediately being in the Norman Bates world, but I really did enjoy it. It sets up who this main character is, and I imagine for audiences back then to spend the first 20 to 30 minutes with this young woman, and then she immediately just gets murdered in one of the most visceral scenes you've ever seen depicted on screen, it has to be a shock, to say the least. The iconic shower scene was amazing. I had seen it before, obviously. You can't not live a life and not kind of take that in through osmosis. But I wanted to talk about what actually makes that shower scene so special. In the context of history, when you're looking at 1960 film, or that point in time in 1960, movie and violence did not really go together. We were still in the times of the Hays Code, which was established back in the 30s, and the Hays Code basically decided what was allowed to be depicted and what was not. So violence, sex, nudity, all of that was not allowed in film. But as the years progressed, you go through the 50s and into the 60s, the rules started to become a little bit more lax. And so you have Hitchcock kind of playing with the rules and bending the rules, but also being one of the first people to do so. So when Psycho opens and you have Janet Leigh in her bra, not a very revealing bra to be fair, but it is her undergarments, audiences right off the bat were like, whoa, what the hell is this? This is insane. And then you talk about the shower scene, and that's just a whole completely different story. It's visceral, it's violent, you know she's nude in the shower. And so that's kind of the impact time-wise. But why that scene is still timeless today, it's because you have a couple different things happening all at the same time. The first technique that Hitchcock is employing is rapid cuts. Immediately, quickly cutting between various different things. So the things we're cutting between constantly are Lee's face, the knife, the blood going down the drain, and during all of this, you have the water head, or the water shooting from the water head at all times. So you're quickly cutting all throughout this, and you have the depth of both Lee and the water coming down. And so that creates, because of the speed of the cutting and the layers that the image have behind the water, that creates a real visceral, up close and personal experience. And then of course you have the auditory aspect. You have the iconic score going, you have the screams of Janet Leigh, you have the shower sounds, and you have the knife, both the knife kind of flying in the air and the knife piercing her skin. And so both the visual aspects of the quick cutting and the layers in the frame and the audio aspects, the simultaneous sounds, creates an overwhelming, terrifying experience that maybe for today it might seem mild, but especially in the 1960s, shocked many audiences. Now, for the character of Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins does an absolutely fantastic job because he plays both sides of the coin he needs to play perfectly. Early on, he looks like an unassuming, lanky motel guy, and maybe early on you can kind of pick up that he's lonely, but you're not really thinking he's a psychopathic killer. He might just be a lonely guy that's out in the middle of nowhere running this hotel. And so he's a little bit sympathetic. Perkins has the right frame. The way Perkins delivers certain lines is really well done early on. And then you start to learn a little bit more about his backstory. You understand that he's sexually repressed because of his mother. You start to see that he has a very domineering relationship with his mother domineering him. And then the layers start to reveal. You have the room filled of taxidermy. He peeps in on Janet Leigh. And Hitchcock tries to fake you out and makes you think that it's the mother doing all this. But of course, it ends up being Norman Bates. He's a fascinating and disturbing psychological case study, and Anthony Perkins was 100% the right guy to do the job. So we have the early on segment with Janet Leigh. She goes into the motel, she gets murdered, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what the hell is going to be the rest of this movie? And the rest of the film is of course, he's the master of suspense, so it's an exercise in suspense as multiple people are starting to close in on Norman Bates, or at least the Bates Motel, what they suspect to be his mother being the killer. There's a private investigator that comes by, and the conversation between the investigator and Bates is absolutely brilliant. There's so much tension. You can see each of them moving their chess pieces. Norman Bates trying to be protective. There's a great little acting tick that Anthony Perkins does is he starts stuttering during his conversations with the investigator, develops a stutter, which we had not seen before. And so right there, you can already tell something's off, and the investigator can tell. Now, everyone remembers the iconic shower scene, and it's iconic for a reason. But my favorite scene, and the most terrifying scene, I think, was the final Bates reveal. You have Leigh's sister finally in the basement. She's turning around Mother, and she sees that Mother is a rotting corpse. And then in comes Norman Bates with his mother's dress and wig on to murder her. Luckily, Bates is stopped and arrested. But that scene is goddamn terrifying because the mother's voice plays while Bates is smiling at you and he runs in to go kill her. Like, that scene to me should be the most visceral or iconic scene, but I completely understand why Janet Leigh's sequence with her nudity in the shower, and that was the first time an audience had kind of seen that, versus once you have the Norman Bates in his mother's outfit, that's a little bit more tame in comparison. But that was the biggest surprise for me, so that got the biggest scare for me personally. I do take slight issue with the ending. When once he is captured, the film and the screenplay really feels a need to explain everything that happened, and so you literally have a 4-minute dialogue from a psychologist that did his study on Bates, and he explains the entire thing, how he had this relationship with his mother, how he got jealous, how he was sexually repressed, blah, blah, blah. And maybe it's because I'm seeing this from 2026 eyes that I could already pick up on everything, but I think a little bit more subtlety in that ending, in that reveal, would have made the finale a little bit more impactful, because when you just have the psychologist kind of monologuing to me what I already kind of knew, I don't think it's as effective. Now, maybe that's me seeing it with 2026 eyes, but that's my perspective. I think the film should have ended with him being captured, he goes to jail, and then that final shot with him looking down, smiling menacingly, and he's inside of his own head, kind of having the conversation with his mother. Psycho was a blast. It was so much fun to watch. It was so much fun to research and kind of understand this classic and its place in the world. I can't wait when I watch future movies past the 1960s to start picking up on Psycho's influence. Alfred Hitchcock is one of the greatest directors of all time because he was able to play not only with genre, but whatever genre he was playing in, whether it was a spy, whether it was a traditional noir, he always injected a very suspenseful feeling in all of his films, and you feel that in Psycho. I absolutely loved it. I give it 5 stars. One of the best films of the 1960s.